We continue now at the top of Daf Mem Daled Amud Aleph in Meseches Pesachim. This is Pesachim Daf 44a. The Gemara is discussing the issue of heter mitzdaref le'isser. The Gemara said in the previous Amud that we normally do not say heter is mitzdaref le'isser if you have something that's usher that you're eating less than a kazayis, just because you're eating something mutter together with it and it adds up to a kazayis, that's not going to make it a prohibited. Except there were two exceptions, the Gemara said. The first exception was a nazir having grape products, and then Ze'iri had an additional exception, that was sa'or that you burn on the mizbeach. So the Gemara now asks, when it comes to sa'or that you burn on the mizbeach, the idea of heter mitzdaref le'isser, that follows Rabbi Eliezer. But if so, we have a third case. Le'inyan chametz b'Pesach nami. Isn't there a third case of chametz on Pesach? Because according to Rabbi Eliezer, what is the whole case of a mixture of chametz? Isn't that a case where you have some chametz which is aser, less than a kazayis, mixed in with food which is mutter? And we say in such a case there's a lav. Rashi says, afilu chametz nami do'amrinan ale ruvo belav. What Rabbi Eliezer says is, if you have a mixture of chametz, it's a lav. V'hainu nami heter mitzdaref le'isser. That's exactly the case of heter mitzdaref le'isser. So why did the Gemara in the previous Amud only have two exceptions? We should have chametz and Pesach as well as a third exception. So the Gemara says, in hachinami, indeed you are correct. Ulehafuke mida Abaye. But what it means over there is simply to exclude Abaye. The Amar yesh haktar lepachos mikazayis. Abaye's opinion was, if you burn sa'or on the mizbech even less than a kazayis, you're chayiv. Kamash malon the haktar lav lepachos mikazayis. The chiddush of Ze'iri really was that if it's less than a kazayis, it's not enough. You have to have some heter there as well to make it a full kazayis. Rashi over here explains, Umeshani inochinami the chametz b'Pesach heter mitzdaref le'isser. It's true. By chametz on Pesach, heter is mitzdaref le'isser. And the reason why Ze'iri specifically brings the case of Sa'or by Karban Mincha, he just means to exclude Abaye's position. Abaye says if you do Haktar on the Mizbeach of Sa'or less than a Kazayis, it's going to be a Aser. V'chayiv, you're going to be chayiv in that case. V'chayiv b'Haktar asor kaldu, even the smallest amount. V'lo boitzir, if you don't need to have additional heter together. And Abaye would actually learn the earlier Bryce in the following fashion: how do you know that even a half a zayis of Sa'or on the Mizbeach is a problem? Talmud Lomar Kol, he learns that from Kol. V'yolef mina diyesh haktar lepachos mikazayis. Kamash malon de'ein haktar. That's what Ze'iri on the previous Amud is coming to exclude. He's saying no, there's no haktar less than a kazayis. V'i'ikot tziruf in v'ilolo. You have to have a tziruf of heter. If you have that, fine. If you don't have that, then you don't have the yisr. Yosef Rav Dimi v'kamar lo hashmaita. So Rav Dimi was sitting and he was saying over this sugya. Amar le Abaye le Rav Dimi. So Abaye said to Rav Dimi, V'chol isurin shabatorah ein heter mitzdaref le'isser. Is it really true that when it comes to other isurin in the Torah, heter is not mitzdaref le'isser? I'll show you that it is mitzdaref. V'atzanan, but we learned in a Mishnah, hamikveh shel truma v'hashum v'hashemen shel chulin. Let's say you have a tavshil, you have a cooked food of truma, and you have garlic, you have oil that's chulin. Rashi over here explains, hamikveh tavshil kafui v'av shel truma. Means a thick cooked item of truma, kagon daisa, v'hashum v'hashemen hanesunim bulatavlin. And then you have some spices, let's say you have garlic, you have oil, they're put into this mikveh, hayu shel chulin. Those happen to be chulin. So the main thing is truma, and the spices, the additional thing is chulin. So the Mishnah says, "V'naga tvul yom b'miksasan." If a tvul yom, somebody who's tamei touches part of them, pasal es kulan, he's going to pasal the entire thing. Rashi over here says, pasal es kol hakadera, the mikveh ikr. The point is, the mikveh, which is truma, is the main thing. U'tvul yom pasal es truma. The halach is that a tvul yom pasals truma, just like the sheni can pasal truma. So the tvul yom is going to touch the cooked item, and everything is going to be a problem. But if it's the reverse, hamikveh shel chulin v'hashum v'hashemen shel truma. Let's say the truma in there is just a small amount, just the spices, just the seasoning. Everything else, the main part is chulin. V'naga tvul yom b'miksasan, and again the tvul yom touches part of the truma. Lo pasal ela makom mago bilvad. In that case, since the spices are just tafel, they're just subservient to the main dish, so therefore only the area he touches is not the whole thing. V'havinon ba. So we asked on that Mishnah, makom mago amai psula. Why even the area where you touch? Why is that even possible? Habatli lahu tavlin barov. If you have a little truma that falls into a cooked item, isn't it batal barov? It shouldn't be truma anymore. There should be no truma in this dish because the little amount of spices are batal barov. V'yama Rabba bar Barchana, and Rabba bar Barchana answered, Matam, what's the reason? Hoel v'zor loka alein b'kazayis. That no, really the zar of someone who's not a Kohen eats this, if he eats a kazayis worth of these spices, he actually would be chayiv. So what do you mean he'd be chayiv? Why is he chayiv? Hey chidami, what exactly did Rabbi Bar Bar Chana mean? Lav mishum deheter mitzaref l'isser. Didn't he mean that you're not that the spices are a kazayas, but he meant to say that if you eat the spices which are truma together with other parts of the cooked item in total, heter mitzaref l'isser, in total you ate a kazayas, he's saying you're chayiv. So you see by truma, for example, heter is mitzaref l'isser. So the Gemara says, lo, no, that has nothing to do with what Rabbi Bar Chana was talking about. As a matter of fact, you're confusing two separate things. My kazayas, what does it mean over here when Rabbi Bar Chana said that you're going to eat a kazayas of these tavlin? Di'ika kazayas b'chdei achilas pras. The case over here is there's a kazayas b'chdei achilas pras. You're actually eating a kazayas of the spices of truma in the amount of time it takes to eat a meal, and that's like eating a kazayas as long as it's within that time span. And that's going to be considered doraisa. Rashi over here explains, Makom mago amai pasal. Why is the area where the Tvul Yom touched, why is it pasal? Habatlu lehu tavlin baruba. The Gemara initially thinks that the spices which are truma should be batal barov. And Rashi explains, and this is important, Rashi explains that right now the Gemara thinks that the concept of dimua, meaning the concept when you have truma mixed with chulin, the reason why that's asr usually is only derabanan. On a doraisa level, those tavlin would really be batal, and if they are batal, when you touch it, it shouldn't become tameh. That's what the Gemara initially thought. V'yamar Rabbi Bar Bar Chana dimua mi doraisa. Rabbi Bar Chana is saying no, dimua is really doraisa. This stuff is not batal. V'zar loka Allah b'kazayis, and in fact, if a zar would eat this, he would get malchus. If he eats a kazayis, mishum diyesh shem truma Allah, this is still called truma. Hilkach legabe tumanami, when it comes to tum as well, shem truma Allah, it's called truma. But it's not so chamor that the entire thing is going to be pasul like truma. So the Gemara initially thinks, why is this non-Kohen getting malchus for eating it? There's no kazayas over here. Isn't it because heter is mitzaref le'isr? And the Gemara says, no, Mashani my loka b'kazayis dekamar kazayis b'chdei achilas pras. We're talking about a kazayis b'chdei achilas pras. Shemachal pras mimenu shir arba beitzim yeshbo kazayis truma. That if you eat a pras of this item, and within that shir you have a kazayis of actual truma, then that's called a kazayis in the time span of an achilas pras, and you're going to be chayiv for eating that truma if you're not a Kohen. The kaimulon dechol shiure achilas isur bein kazayas shel chaylev v'dam uvein koseves diyom hakipurim mitztarefes achilas hashir b'chdei sheyazu. That's the halach in general. You always measure the kazayas in the time span of a kadei achilas pras. Shemachal kachar el chaylev v'chazer v'yachal kachar. Let's eat like a little tiny amount of chaylev and a little more. Ad shehishlam lekazayas, and then you finally eat a kazayas. Emein mitzchilas or achilav yatsofa yoser mishias kadei achilas pras. If you don't have more, if it doesn't take more than the amount of time to eat a pras, which again is the amount of time it takes to eat a meal, it's as if you ate it all in one shot, and you're chayiv. Hachanami here also, yesh kan shuma kedei letzaref kazayis b'achilas pras mimenu. In this particular case, the spices that you're adding, there is enough truma there that you can eat a kazayis in the time span of an achilas pras, and that's exactly what Rabbi Bar Bar Chana meant when he said that you have a situation over here where if a zar eats it, it's possible that he's chayiv for eating loka alei, and he's going to get malchus for eating it b'chazayis. And so the Gemara asks, "Chazayis b'chdei achilas pras doraisa? Is that really true that a kazayis b'chdei achilas pras is an isur doraisa?" Amar Lei said to him, yes, it is doraisa. So the Gemara says, one second, if so, amai pligi rabbanon oled Rabbi Eliezer b'kusach habavli. If there's a concept of kazayis b'chdei achilas pras, and really with this question, the Gemara is explaining everything that we've been dealing with until now. If there really is a concept of kazayis b'chdei achilas pras, so when you have kusach habavli, which is again a dip which has some chametz mixed in, why doesn't everyone agree that that's a problem? Because it's kazayis b'chdei achilas pras. Forget about taroves chametz. Forget about a mixture of chametz. Don't you have a kazayis b'chdei achilas pras? So the Gemara goes back and the Gemara says, fine. If that's going to be your question, elamai, so what are you going to say? Mishum deheter mitzaref le'isr. So you're going to say, no, the real reason is because we have a rule that heter is mitzaref le'isr. That's the real reason, let's say, by truma, why in this case of truma, you're going to be, the zar is going to be chayiv. You have the same question on the Rabbanan there also. Sofa my pligi Rabbanan oled Rabbi Eliezer b'kusach habavli. You have the same question by kusach habavli. Why don't we say it's heter mitzaref le'isr, and everyone should agree? So you always have a question of why the Rabbanan are going to argue with Rabbi Eliezer by kusach habavli. And so the Gemara finally explains, Elahanach lekusach habavli. Forget about kusach habavli. the less be kazayis b'chdei achilas pras. The case over there is you don't even have a kazayis b'chdei achilas pras. That's just not even the mitzias. The amount of chametz that exists in this dip of kusach habavli is less than a kazayis b'chdei achilas pras. You're never going to finish a kazayis in that small amount of time, and that's why, again, according to Rabbi Eliezer, who learns out a special drasha that tarovis chametz is a problem, it's a problem. But if you don't have that drasha like the Rabbanan, then it's not going to be a problem. Kusach habavli is not going to be a lav. And the Gemara further explains, if you're going to say over here that you eat it very quickly, try to eat it in a way where you're actually eating an entire kazayis of chametz, that's already not a normal way to eat. You're not going to be chayiv for that, even if you would consume kusach habavli to such an extent that you'd have a chametz b'chdei achilas pras. That wouldn't be called eating. And if you're going to eat in the normal fashion, just dip, so less be kazayis b'chdei achilas pras. Then you don't have the kazayis b'chdei achilas pras. That's why the Rabbanan say you're not chayiv in that case. And the Gemara continues, Eisvei, the Gemara asks, this is a question just on the general concept that kazayis b'chdei achilas pras is doraisa. Shtei kederos, it says if you have two parts, achas shel chulin ve'achas shel truma, one is chulin and one is truma. V'lefnei and shtei meduchos, in front of them are two mortars, achas shel chulin ve'achas shel truma, one contains chulin, one contains truma. V'naflu elu l'soch elu, and each one falls in the other. You don't know whether the truma fell in the truma or the chulin fell in the chulin, or vice versa. You don't know what fell into what. Mutar, and we assume it's mutar, meaning we assume the chulin fell into the chulin, and we assume the truma fell into the truma. Shani omer, I say, truma l'soch truma naflu, truma fell into the truma. V'chulin l'soch chulin naflu, and chulin fell into the chulin. So the Gemara asks, V'yamer kazayis b'chdei achilas pras doraisa. If it's true that kazayis b'chdei achilas pras is an isur doraisa, amay amrinon shani omer truma l'soch v'chulu. Why do we say this leniency of shani omer? This is a very lenient position. That makes sense if you say it's an isur d'Rabbanan. But if you say you're dealing here with a possible isur doraisa, why are we being so lenient? So the Gemara answers, Amar Lei said to him, Hanach l'trumas tavlin d'Rabbanan. When it comes to trum of spices, this case is referring specifically to spices. That's only midrabanan, so it's nothing to worry about. Rashi over here explains, How do we go lakula in an issue that has to do with misa? Kazayis truma v'achilas pras is doraisa. You have a real problem. Obviously, even if it fell in truma into the chulin, we don't say kazayis b'chdei achilas pras is a doraisa. So obviously, we are going to say that we're going to go lakula because kazayis b'chdei achilas pras is derabanan. So the Gemara then says hanach l'trumas tavlin derabanan. The rashis the goncha tiroshcha v'yitzarecha ksiv. The only kind of truma that's doraisa is dagon tirosh v'yitzar. Only those specific food items. But when you have tavlin, it's only midrabanan, and therefore that's why in that particular case we're lenient. And the Gemara continues with a similar question. Eisvei, the Gemara asks, shtei kupos, if you have two boxes, achas shel chulin ve'achas shel truma. Again, one is chulin, one is truma. V'lefneihem beis soin, and in front of them you have two vessels containing a saw. Achas shel chulin ve'achas shel truma. Again, one chulin, one truma. V'naflu elu sochelu. These ones fall into these ones. Mutar, and again it's mutar shani omer, because I can assume chulin l'soch chulin naflu, truma l'soch truma nafla. The chulin fell into the chulin, and the truma fell into the truma. And again, the Gemara asks the same question. V'yamer kazayis b'chdei achilas pras doraisa. If you're going to say kazayis b'chdei achilas pras is doraisa, amay amrinon shani omer. Why do I say shani omer? And as Rashi over here explains, kupas gedolos v'sochan dagan. This is a case of actual grain. The goncha tiroshcha v'yitzarecha. To have a truma doraisa, that's already truma doraisa. You can't answer that it's talking about derabanan types of truma like spices. So what are you going to say over here? So the Gemara says, Amar Lei said to him, Hanoch l'truma bezman hazeh derabanan. No, that's referring to a case bezman hazeh nowadays, when truma is only derabanan, and therefore if it's only derabanan, again, you can be lenient. So now the Gemara asks, V'hai mishras l'hachi u'da'asa. Going back to this case of mishras by Nazir, we said that what does mishras come to teach us? It comes to teach us heter mitzaref l'isser. If a Nazir eats a little bit of wine that's together, it's not a kazayas of wine, but it's mixed in together with heter, and in total he's eating a kazayas, it's a problem. But is that really what the word mishras is coming to teach us? But haimi boile l'chiratanya. Isn't the word mishras coming to teach us that which we learned in the following brisa? Mishras, it says mishras, and we'll continue with this brisa in the next video on Daf Mem Daled Amud Beis.